I never thought a peaceful weekend at my lake cabin would turn into a full-blown war with the HOA president. But that's exactly what happened when Karen, the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, decided she had the authority to block my private cabin exit with her brand new luxury SUV. And when I say block, I mean she parked it right in front of my private driveways, smirking, arms folded, daring me to do something about it. Little did she know, I had a little surprise buried underground, a fully automated retractable Bollard system installed just last month for extra security. And that Bollard, let's just say, it doesn't play around. The morning had started off just the way I liked it. Sunlight breaking through the pine trees, a light breeze ruffling the water on the lake, and the faint scent of coffee coming from my stovetop percolator. I was sitting on the porch with my dog, Max, enjoying the silence that made this cabin my escape from the city grind. For years, this place had been my sanctuary, bought with hard-earned savings and chosen for one main reason: privacy. But lately, that peace had been under threat, and it all started when the land around my property got developed into a shiny new lakeside community. The problem wasn't the homes or even the new neighbors. It was the HOA that came with them. More specifically, it was their loudest and most entitled voice. Karen. Karen wasn't just any homeowner. She saw herself as the ruler of the entire development. Within weeks of moving in, she became HOA president and started acting like she had power over every square inch of land, even the areas not covered under HOA jurisdiction. She issued letters to residents about lawn lengths, flower types, and boat dock colors. But her biggest obsession, my cabin. To her, my rustic wooden structure was an eyesore, a blemish on the otherwise cookie-cutter perfection of the new development. But what she failed to understand, or refused to accept, was that my property predated the HOA, and it had never been under their authority. I was legally and fully outside their control. Still, that didn't stop her from trying to bend the rules to her favor. At first, it was little things. A note on my gate asking me to paint the cabin in community-approved colors. Then came emails, then in-person visits. Each time, I explained politely that my land was not HOA property. Each time, she got more aggressive. The week before the SUV incident, Karen had shown up with 2 board members in tow, holding clipboards like they were on some sort of inspection mission. They walked around my property uninvited, snapping photos and jotting notes. When I confronted them, Karen told me they were preparing a compliance package and warned me that action would be taken if I didn't bring the property up to community standards. I laughed in disbelief. "This isn't your jurisdiction," I reminded her. She didn't like that answer. I thought that would be the end of it. But no, Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly. She was the type who needed to win, to dominate, to control everything around her, and that's how we got to that Saturday morning. The morning her shiny black SUV suddenly appeared across my only exit path. I didn't see her at first. I had just loaded my truck with supplies and was about to head into town for some hardware and groceries. I opened the gate, drove forward, and stopped. There she was, parked horizontally right across my exit, blocking the gravel road like a barrier. She was sitting on a foldable lawn chair beside the vehicle, sipping iced coffee and flipping through a binder. When she saw me, she stood up and walked over, waving a hand like she was greeting an old friend. "Good morning," she said, wearing a smile I knew was fake. "We need to talk about your non-compliance before you leave." I stared at her, stunned for a moment. "You're blocking my driveway, Karen." "It's not a driveway," she replied smugly. "It's a shared access road now. Community guidelines are in effect." "No, it's a private access road that's part of my deed," I said firmly. "Now move your vehicle." She took a step closer. "Not until we agree on a date for your compliance review." That's when it became crystal clear she wasn't just annoying anymore. She was escalating. This was her making a statement, trying to push me into a corner. But what she didn't know was that I had been planning for this level of nonsense. See, after their little inspection visit, I had a hunch things would get worse. That's when I installed the automatic Bollard at the entrance to my driveway, a retractable steel post that rises out of the ground when activated by a keypad. It was meant for safety and privacy, but also to ensure nobody could block me in or out without consequences. I gave her one more chance. "Karen, I'm not going to ask again. Move your car." She crossed her arms and grinned. "Call the cops if you want." "I already did. They'll be here soon, and I'd love for them to see this mess." My eyes drifted to the keypad hidden near the bushes. I took a deep breath, walked over, and punched in the 4-digit code. The moment the number was entered, I heard the soft hydraulic hum beneath the gravel. Karen turned just in time to watch the ground open and the Bollard rise. And then, crunch! Her SUV jolted as the metal post met the undercarriage. The sound was loud, ugly, and final. Karen's eyes widened in horror as she realized what had just happened. The smug look vanished instantly. She ran to her vehicle and tried to reverse, but it was too late. The Bollard was locked in place, holding her car like a trap, and that was just the beginning. Let me back up a little so you understand just how we got to this point. I never set out to make enemies or cause drama. In fact, when I bought the lakefront cabin, my only goal was peace and quiet. After years of working long shifts in the city, this place was supposed to be my escape. No traffic, no crowds, no stress, just me, the trees, and the water. When I first toured the land, I fell in love with the remoteness. The lot was surrounded on 3 sides by dense woods, and on the 4th side, the shimmering lake. The cabin itself wasn't much, just a 2-bedroom, wooden structure with a porch and a dock, but it was perfect to me. And most importantly, there was no HOA, no neighborhood rules, no committees, just freedom. For almost 2 years, I had no issues at all. Life was quiet. Max, my German Shepherd, had space to roam, and I'd spend my weekends fishing, hiking, or working on small improvements to the cabin. My only neighbors were wildlife and the occasional hiker passing through. But that all changed when the land just beyond my tree line got bought up by a developer. It started innocently enough. One day, a team came in with survey equipment. Then came bulldozers. Within 6 months, what used to be forest became a new luxury lake community, with matching homes, paved streets, and an HOA that came out swinging with rules, newsletters, and meetings. I kept to myself, thinking it wouldn't affect me. After all, my property wasn't part of the development. It was older, separate, and had its own access road that cut through a sliver of the new subdivision but was legally recorded in my deed. As private, still the changes were impossible to ignore. Instead of owls and squirrels, I now heard lawnmowers, music, and car alarms. Instead of waving to the occasional fisherman, I started getting strange looks from newcomers walking there. Golden retrievers in matching sweaters. At first, I tried to be friendly. I'd wave to the new folks, even invited one couple over for a beer on the dock. But then came Karen. I first met her when I was fixing the roof one Saturday. She walked up my driveway uninvited, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Hi there," she said, flashing a tight smile. "I'm Karen. I'm the HOA president for Lakeview Estates. Just wanted to welcome you and talk about your cabin's exterior." I was confused. I explained that I wasn't part of Lakeview Estates and didn't fall under their HOA rules. Her smile never wavered. "I understand," she said, "but your cabin is visible from the lake, and we have certain community standards to maintain the overall aesthetic." That was the first red flag. I politely declined her suggestions and walked her back to the main road. But Karen didn't give up. She started slow, sending me printed newsletters with sticky notes saying friendly reminder, blue siding is not approved. Then came the letters. Then the photos taken of my truck, my firewood stack, and even my dog. She cited imaginary violations and referenced a shared lakefront image agreement that didn't exist. When I didn't respond, she escalated. One day I found a notice stapled to a tree on my property. Final warning, failure to comply will result in legal action. That's when I contacted my lawyer, who confirmed what I already knew. Her HOA had no power over me, my land, or anything I did on it. Still, I wanted to avoid conflict. I ignored her as best as I could, thinking she'd eventually get bored and move on. I underestimated her. Karen took it personally, and she wasn't alone. Slowly, a few of her HOA board members started showing up near my property line. Once, I caught 2 of them with measuring tape near my driveway, claiming they were verifying property boundaries. Another time, someone left a bright orange flag near my dock, the kind used for marking utilities. That's when I realized they were trying to create the illusion that I was in violation of something, anything to build a case against me. I started documenting everything. I installed cameras at my entrance, recorded every letter, and backed up every legal document, proving my land's independence from their HOA. I wasn't going to let them trick me into submission. Then came the so-called compliance review. Karen showed up with 2 other board members, walked onto my property like they owned the place, and announced they were conducting a visual inspection. I stopped them immediately. "You're trespassing," I said. "You have no right to be here." Karen waved her clipboard. "We're acting on behalf of the community," she said. I pointed to the sign on my gate. "Private property, no trespassing." She ignored it. That's when I knew things were headed toward a breaking point. After they left, I decided I needed more than cameras and warning signs. I needed something that would physically prevent anyone from blocking my access or entering without permission. That's when I had the retractable Bollard installed. The system was discreet, buried just below the gravel, invisible unless activated. It could hold over 20,000 pounds and was designed to stop vehicles from entering or exiting without the proper code. It wasn't cheap, but it gave me peace of mind. I figured it would be a silent deterrent, something I'd never need to use. But of course, I was wrong. The week following their inspection, I avoided town. I didn't want to run into Karen or any of her cronies, but supplies were running low. I needed dog food, groceries, and a new water filter. I loaded up the truck early Saturday, intending to be in and out of town before lunch. That's when I opened the gate and saw it. Karen's shiny black SUV, parked directly across the gravel road, blocking my only way out. She had even brought a folding chair and cooler. like she planned to stay a while. She was sitting there, flipping through papers, pretending to be unbothered. When I stepped out of my truck and walked toward her, she didn't even stand. "We're not going to keep doing this dance," she said without looking up. "You've refused every polite request, so now we're going to do it my way. Either we schedule a compliance meeting today, or you're not leaving." That was it. She had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But instead of yelling, I just smiled. Karen had no idea that her blockade had parked directly over something she didn't even know existed, and what happened next would be the most expensive mistake she ever made. When I walked toward her SUV and stood right at the edge of my gravel driveway, Karen still hadn't realized she was parked over a hidden trap. She sat in her lawn chair like a queen defending her castle, one hand holding her iced coffee and the other flipping pages in a thick HOA binder. It was almost theatrical the way she glanced up at me, so smug, so sure she had finally cornered me into a compromise. But what she didn't understand was that I don't negotiate when it comes to my own land, especially not with someone trying to bully me into submission under authority they don't even legally have. Karen, I said calmly, "I'm going to town. Move your car." She smiled like a snake. "Not until we talk about scheduling your compliance hearing." I folded my arms and looked at her, deadpan. "This is trespassing. You know that, right?" "It's not," she insisted. "Standing up. This road is considered part of Lakeview Estates access. I had the board vote on it." I shook my head, half amused, half disgusted. "You can't vote away a deeded easement. This road is part of my title, and you're illegally parked on it." "Well, then I guess you'll have to sue me," she snapped, clearly thinking she'd called my bluff. "Or you can be reasonable and sit down for the compliance review." That's when I calmly walked over to the side of the driveway, near the bushes where the keypad was hidden. Karen barely even glanced in my direction. She had no idea what was coming. I entered the 4-digit code slowly, almost deliberately, like I wanted to give her one last chance to move. She didn't. She was too busy texting someone, probably bragging about her little power move. Then came the hum. The mechanical sound of the Bollard lifting was subtle at first, more like a slow growl under the earth. But then came the clang. As the steel post made contact with the underside of her luxury SUV, her vehicle jolted as if something had punched it from below. Karen jumped, her head snapping toward the noise, confusion instantly morphing into horror. "What the what is that?" she shouted, running toward her vehicle. But it was too late. The Bollard had fully risen, piercing into the undercarriage and smashing into the engine guard. Her SUV's front wheels lifted slightly off the ground, the frame groaning under the pressure. She screamed, hands flailing in panic. "You crushed my car. What did you do?" I stood calmly beside the keypad, arms crossed. "I told you not to block my driveway. That's my vehicle security system. Installed it last month in case of emergency." Karen dropped to her knees, beside her car, looking underneath at the mangled mess of pipes and metal now entwined with the stainless steel post. The bumper was cracked, and some kind of fluid, likely transmission fluid, was already leaking onto the gravel. "You lunatic. You'll pay for this," she shrieked. "This is vandalism." I pulled out my phone, hit a button, and played back the footage from my security camera. There it was, clear as day, her pulling up, parking deliberately in front of the driveway, setting up her chair, and laughing on a call as she waited for me. It showed her refusing to move, me asking politely, and her brushing it off like she had all the power. "You're going to want to show this to the cops when they arrive," I said, holding the screen in front of her. She stared at it, stunned, speechless for the first time since I'd met her. Then, right on cue, red and blue lights began to flash through the trees as a sheriff's SUV pulled up behind us. Karen's eyes lit up with hope, probably thinking the cavalry had arrived to rescue her from the big, bad cabin guy. She ran over to the deputy before he'd even gotten out of the car. "Officer, thank God. He just attacked my car with some machine. Look at what he did." The deputy stepped out slowly, glanced at the scene, and raised an eyebrow. He looked at the Bollard, still embedded in her car, then over at me. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" I nodded. "Absolutely, officer, this is private property. I have video proof of her trespassing, blocking my only access road. I asked her to move. She refused. My driveway security system activated. It's automated." Karen interrupted, waving her binder. "He's lying. This road belongs to the HOA." That's when I pulled out my deed folder from the glove compartment of my truck and handed it over. "This document shows the road is part of my property. It's a deeded easement. I also have a copy of the permit for the Bollard system, along with camera footage of everything." The deputy reviewed it silently, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, based on this, it looks like you're the one who's trespassing. Blocking someone's private driveway can be considered obstruction." Asterisk, but I'm the HOA president, she yelled, as if that changed the law. Asterisk, the deputy wasn't impressed. The HOA has no authority over land not included in the association's jurisdiction. His property and this road are not listed in your HOA documentation. Asterisk, Karen's face turned beet red. She looked like she wanted to explode but couldn't find the words. Asterisk, I'm not going to arrest you today, the officer said, but I am filing a trespassing warning and a civil incident report. You'll also be liable for any damage caused to this man's property, especially if that bollard needs recalibration due to impact. Asterisk, Karen stood frozen, trembling, caught between fury and disbelief. You mean he's not getting arrested? Asterisk, no, ma'am, the officer said. You are. Asterisk, technically, she wasn't taken into custody, but she was cited and issued an official warning. The deputy helped me document everything further and advised Karen to have her vehicle towed since the SUV couldn't move under its own power anymore. Asterisk, the tow truck took nearly an hour to arrive. Karen sat silently in her folding chair, humiliated, watching as the truck lifted her broken vehicle off the steel post. The driver chuckled when he saw the damage. Yep, he said, that's gonna be a pricey fix. Asterisk, I stood by the bollard, not saying a word. I didn't have to. The scene spoke for itself. Asterisk, as the tow truck pulled away and Karen finally left with it. I reset the bollard back into the ground. The gravel settled over it as if nothing had happened. Just nature reclaiming its peace. Asterisk, but I knew Karen wouldn't give up that easily, and I was already thinking ahead because next time, I wouldn't just be ready. I'd be waiting. After the tow truck finally dragged Karen's mangled SUV out of my driveway and disappeared down the road, I stood there for a moment in absolute silence, just breathing in the calm that had finally returned. The smell of transmission fluid lingered in the air, mixed with the crushed gravel and the faint scent of pine. Max, my German shepherd, trotted over and sat next to me, tongue hanging out like he too was enjoying the brief peace. I ran my hand over his head, letting out a tired sigh. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen didn't strike me as the kind of person who accepted defeat gracefully. If anything, today's embarrassment would only fuel her obsession further. She had just watched her precious SUV get wrecked by a steel post she didn't even know existed. Her authority had been challenged, her ego bruised, and worst of all, she had lost control in front of the one person she couldn't stand, me. Still, for now, the road was clear, and the day was only halfway gone. I decided to continue with my original plan and drive into town. I lowered the bollard, climbed into my truck, and headed off the gravel road, my tires crunching over the last bits of disturbed earth where her vehicle had sat. As I drove, I kept glancing at the trees, half expecting her to jump out and try something else, but there was no sign of her. Just trees, birds, and the steady hum of my truck. In town, people greeted me like always, friendly, casual. The general store owner asked if I'd finally caught that nosy HOA lady snooping around again. Word traveled fast in small communities, especially when it involved drama. I just gave him a knowing smile and said, let's just say she won't be parking on my road again anytime soon. I stocked up on supplies, including a brand new security camera system with motion sensors and remote access, just in case. If Karen was going to play this game, I was going to be prepared every step of the way. When I returned to the cabin that evening, everything looked exactly how I'd left it, which was both a relief and a surprise. I installed the new cameras, checked the perimeter, and even added a small solar-powered floodlight near the bollard. In case anyone tried creeping in after dark, I wanted evidence. The law had been on my side so far, and I intended to keep it that way. 2 days passed without incident. No mysterious cars, no angry notes, no HOA agents measuring trees. For the first time in weeks, I actually started to relax. I spent my mornings fishing off the dock, my afternoons working on a new firewood shelter, and my evenings watching the sun dip below the tree line with Max curled up at my feet. But that calm only lasted until Thursday morning. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I heard voices low, hushed, and close. I slipped on my boots and quietly stepped off the porch, motioning for Max to stay. As I approached the tree line near the access road, I spotted 2 people crouched down by the side of the gravel path. One was holding a clipboard. The other had what looked like a tape measure. And in the distance, parked off the side but still very close, was Karen's second car, a silver sedan. She hadn't even been subtle this time. She'd brought back up. Didn't say a word. I just turned and walked back to the cabin, opened the shed, and retrieved my drone. I launched it from the front porch and flew it up silently, angling the camera toward the road. There they were, Karen and one of her board members, clearly surveying something, pointing toward my property, and jotting things down. I recorded everything. After about 20 minutes, they walked back to the sedan and drove off without ever knocking or announcing themselves. Later that afternoon, I went into town again, this time to visit the county land office. I explained the situation and showed the drone footage. The clerk, a middle-aged man named Harold, who'd lived in the area his whole life, pulled up the property maps. He pointed out what I already knew: my land was outside of the HOA boundaries. My access road was deeded exclusively to me, and the HOA had no jurisdiction whatsoever. Can they file anything to change that? I asked. He shook his head. Not unless you agree to join the HOA voluntarily, and with the way things are going, I'd say that's a hard no. I laughed. You got that right. Harold helped me file an official incident complaint to document the trespassing and unauthorized surveying. It wouldn't lead to any immediate legal consequences for Karen, but it was one more record in my favor. One more nail in the coffin of whatever fantasy she was building about controlling my land. By the time I got back to the cabin that evening, I was exhausted. But instead of relaxing, I decided to write a long letter, one I planned to send via certified mail to the board, the local sheriff's office, and my attorney. It outlined every incident, every trespass, and included the drone footage, Bollard installation permit, property deed, and even the video of Karen's SUV getting crushed. I wanted it all on record. No misunderstandings, no confusion. Just facts. 3 days later, I got a response not from Karen, but from the HOA board's lawyer. The letter was short, formal, and surprisingly cooperative. It acknowledged the incidents, stated that the HOA had overstepped its bounds, and that Karen's actions did not represent official policy. It also assured me that no further attempts would be made to claim my land, access road, or structures. I couldn't believe it. Karen must have been reprimanded or even removed from her position. Either way, I'd won. Not just because her SUV got crushed, but because I stood up to the bullying, documented everything, and refused to back down. I laminated that letter and pinned a copy to the inside of my cabin door, right next to the original deed. Karen hasn't shown her face since. No more notes, no more clipboards, no more late-night drive-bys. Max still barks at squirrels like his job depends on it, but the peace has finally returned for real this time. And as for the Bollard, I upgraded it with a sensor that alerts my phone every time someone gets within 5 feet of it, just in case someone forgets their last lesson. The silence that followed the last official letter was almost eerie. After all the chaos, the threats, the trespassing, and the drama, I wasn't sure if I should feel victorious or just cautious. Karen's absence was noticeable, like a storm that had passed but left behind wreckage and tension in the air. I couldn't relax completely, not yet. People like her don't just disappear, they retreat, recalculate, and wait for another opportunity to strike. But for now, I enjoyed the quiet. The weather was warming up, birds were nesting in the trees again, and Max spent his mornings sniffing around the edges of the cabin as if checking for intruders. He hadn't barked in days. That alone was a good sign. Despite the HOA's official retreat and their lawyer's written apology, I still felt uneasy. I knew Karen had taken the SUV incident personally. She had stood there and watched as her pride and joy got torn apart by something she never even saw coming. And knowing her personality, she probably didn't tell the whole story to the HOA board. Maybe she framed it as an accident, or worse, blamed me entirely to save face. But the board clearly knew the truth based on their tone in the letter. Someone must have put their foot down. Maybe they realized how legally exposed they were. Or maybe Karen had finally pushed even her allies too far. Either way, I wasn't taking any chances. I used that quiet time to reinforce my perimeter. I added another trail camera just inside the woods, along the eastern tree line. I also extended the gravel around the Bollard's base and installed a small sign that read "Automated Security System. No parking violators will be reported." It wasn't meant to scare anyone. It was meant to make sure no one could claim they weren't warned. The town knew what had happened. Word had spread fast, especially among the contractors and delivery folks who passed through Lakeview Estates. Some of them even started asking me how they could get bollards installed themselves. One afternoon, a young guy named Caleb who worked with a local fencing company stopped by while delivering wood panels for a shed I was building. He leaned against his truck and asked, "So that story about the HOA lady and your driveway bollard, is that real?" I nodded. "Every bit of it." He laughed. "Man, I heard she had a meltdown right there on the gravel, like full-on screaming." "She did," I said, "but the screaming stopped when the cops arrived." He whistled. "Well, let me just say, legendary. You're kind of a folk hero now." I didn't want to be a local legend. I just wanted to be left alone, but it was funny how one act of self-defense, one boundary enforced, could ripple through a community and remind people that standing up for yourself wasn't a crime. About a week after the letter, I received a small envelope. In the mail, no return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single typed sentence. "You will regret embarrassing me." No name, no signature, but I didn't need one. The tone, the passive-aggressive threat to it, was pure Karen. I immediately took it to the sheriff's office and filed a harassment report. The deputy on duty recognized me right away. "Oh, the Bollard guy," he said, half smiling. "Yeah, This sounds like her. You want us to pay her a visit? I shook my head. Not unless she shows up again. I just want it on record. Even though the threat felt empty, I increased my security. I upgraded the cameras to live feed models and added a motion sensor to the Bollard's activation system. I also built a physical gate across the front entrance, not to keep people out, but to remind them they had to stop before thinking about coming in. Karen's silence continued, but I remained on alert. Then came a twist I never saw coming. One late afternoon, I received a call from a man named Greg. He introduced himself as a former HOA board member who had recently resigned. "I'm calling you privately," he said. "I just want to apologize for everything that's happened. Karen misled the board. She told us your property was technically part of the HOA boundary. When she showed us her documentation, it was doctored." I was stunned. "You're saying she forged property maps?" "Basically," Greg replied. "She shaded in your access road and claimed it was a shared easement. But after what happened with her SUV, the board looked deeper into the original land documents. That's when we found out she had altered the scanned images she shared." "Why would she do that?" I asked. "Because she wanted your land," he said. "There's been talk about building a community clubhouse, and your lot was the perfect secluded location. She thought if she could pressure you into joining the HOA, she could force a sale or claim violations to justify legal action." It all made sense now. The trespassing, the clipboard inspections, the sudden roadblock. It wasn't just about my siding or paint color. It was about control. Karen had wanted my land for her dream project. And when I refused to bend, she decided to try and break me. "She's being removed." Greg added, "We've already voted. The sheriff's office is investigating the forged documents. I thought you deserved to know the whole truth." I thanked him deeply and hung up the phone. With a strange mix of relief and frustration, Karen's plot had been bigger than I imagined. But in the end, she had been exposed not just by the Bollard or the cameras, but by her own overreach. That weekend, I finally relaxed. I lit a fire in the pit by the dock, grilled some steaks, and let Max run free through the woods. I sat back, watching the stars appear one by one, and listened to the frogs croaking near the lake. This was the life I had fought to protect. Not just the cabin, not just the land, but the right to be left alone. As I looked out over the quiet water, I thought about how close I came to losing that freedom, not because of laws or courts, but because of one person's hunger for control. It reminded me that in today's world, you don't just defend your home with locks and fences. You defend it with knowledge, with preparation, and with the courage to say no when someone tries to push too far. Karen never came back. The HOA sent a formal apology, and Greg even dropped off a bottle of wine with a handwritten note thanking me for standing firm. The Bollard, strong as ever, remains in place at the end of my driveway. I pass it every time I leave, and I smile not because of what it did to Karen's car, but because it represents something deeper. It's a symbol of boundaries, of rights, of not backing down, and to anyone thinking of trying something similar, let's just say ask Karen how that worked out.